Hi, I'm Tracey. I'm a coach, I'm a consultant, an author, and a speaker. I help leaders with mental clarity and calm composure in high pressure environments. I consider many different types of people to be leaders. We have leaders in corporate environments, but also leaders who are entrepreneurs, leaders in their community, and leaders in families, even leaders who are parents and want to have a positive influence on their children. I love helping all kinds of leaders lead with less stress and more ease. Today, I want to talk about how to stay grounded during times of stress and change. And this year, it feels particularly relevant to be speaking about that. 2025 has already been quite eventful so far. How can you stay grounded during times of stress and change? I know for me, sometimes when I get caught up feeling stressed or overwhelmed, it feels like I don't have stable ground to stand on. It feels like moving parts at my work, moving parts at home and my family. And it's this general feeling of unease where it's hard to know where I stand and it's hard to feel relaxed and clear mentally when there are so many different moving pieces all the time that never seem to stop. But let's talk about how to stay grounded during those times. So for me, when I get caught up feeling like that, when I feel swept away by events happening in my life or events happening in the world, watching the news, politics right now are a hot topic, lots of things happening. So when I notice that I'm feeling swept away, to me, that's a sign that it's time for me to slow down and quiet the internal noise that I have. And what I mean by internal noise is how busy our minds are, how busy my mind is, and how rushed I feel. If I'm feeling rushed or restless, right? Like I can never catch up. There's never enough time in the day. I can't get to the bottom of my to-do list. I'm trying to do multiple things at once. I'm rushing, and then when I finally have time to sit down, I'm restless. And so even when there's a break, it's hard to sit down and relax. So when I notice that I'm in that headspace or that way of being, that's a sign that I need to slow down internally because I'm rushing, I'm moving faster than the pace of life. And when I notice that I'm moving faster than the pace of life, that's a sign that I need to pause. And usually it starts by just taking a few deep breaths. Because when we get kind of agitated and rushed, our thoughts run faster. Often our heartbeat quickens. We start taking these short, shallow breaths like that, and we just feel rushed and we just feel restless. And it's, there's no end. If you follow that feeling and you just start to move faster, that's the natural inclination that so many people do. I think as humans, that's what we do if we aren't intentional about it. Is we feel rushed and restless, so we move faster and we try to keep up and catch up and we go faster and faster. But you've probably realized there's no finish line. There's no end of the road where you'll go, oh, okay, I made it, I'm done. I can relax. Because there's always more things, isn't there? So rather than moving faster when you feel rushed or restless, it's about pausing and slowing down. And again, just starting by taking some nice deep breaths really starts to slow down the system. It slows down the heart rate and it slows down that quick breathing. And it invites your body to slow down. And the other thing that is helpful is to realize that just because my thoughts are moving fast doesn't mean that I have to move fast. In fact, it's a sign that I should not move fast. So when our thoughts move quick, we're living through the filter of our thinking, right? And so it seems like when our thoughts start to race, and then that's when we have difficulty relaxing, difficulty sleeping because our thoughts just go faster, faster. But just because our thoughts are racing doesn't mean that we have to follow them. It doesn't mean that we have to listen to them. And that's when it's helpful to remember that you are the thinker, right? Like you are the one who's noticing your thoughts. You are not your thoughts. Just because you're thinking something doesn't mean you have to follow it, doesn't mean that it's even true. Thoughts are typically habits. Thoughts are kind of like old programs that we're playing over and over. Thoughts are popping up from the past, or thoughts are worrying about the future, or thoughts are racing about what we still haven't got to yet. But just because our thoughts are running at a certain pace doesn't mean that we need to. And even noticing the tone of your thoughts can be helpful. So for me, when I get swept away, I get rushed, I get restless. If I pause and I notice the tone of my thinking, the tone of my thinking is this panicked, this kind of frantic, frenetic energy of, oh, I've got this and I've got that and I have to figure this out. And it feels like that. It's kind of like this anxious, stressed person in my head. And because we're always feeling our thinking, then whatever we're thinking about is what we're feeling. So if I'm thinking frenetic, anxious, rushed thoughts, that's how I'm feeling. But rather than allowing your thoughts to sweep you away, which it happens, we're humans, but you can start to notice the tone of your thinking. And you can start to choose, okay, do I need to follow that thought right now? So for me, when I notice the frenetic rush thinking, oh, my thoughts are in that kind of anxious, worried state. Like, oh, I just watched the news and heard something kind of scary. And now I'm going into future thinking and I'm going into worry and fear or uncertainty. I'm wondering, what are the next 6 months going to look like with this uncertainty? It doesn't feel like I have a ground to stand on. And then my thoughts start to get that frenetic worry quality. But just because my thoughts go in that direction doesn't mean that I have to follow them. And actually, if I do, that is not the space of my clarity and of my feeling grounded. I'm just going to follow these thoughts down a rabbit hole, and it's going to become this circulating kind of worry rabbit hole that it doesn't usually lead to anywhere good. It just leads to more circular thinking. So to feel more grounded and clear in those types of situations then is noticing the frenetic thinking that's happening, or however that shows up for you. If it's a little anxious, worried, fearful, uncertain. Uncertainty is a big one. Our brains seem to have a lot of difficulty with uncertainty because our brains they want to know. They want to know where we're going. Our brains want to know the future. They want a guaranteed outcome. They want to be planned and prepared for whatever's coming our way so we're not caught off guard, so that we are safe, right? Our brains are always trying to keep us safe. But during times of mass uncertainty, kind of like what we're in right now, a lot of global unrest and global uncertainty, it's quite impossible to know what's going to happen with a lot of these big movements and changes happening on the global level. And so it's noticing when your thoughts are going in that direction and they're going into worry and fear and feeling like there's no ground to stand on with the future. And then choosing to not follow those thoughts. And what I mean by choosing to not follow those thoughts is to not entertain them. So it's kind of like I mentioned, my thoughts get frenetic, right? And they get anxious and they have that tone, that quality about them. So it's kind of as if somebody is knocking on my front door and they're talking like that. Let's say it's a stranger and it's somebody I don't know. And they've knocked on my door and I open the door and I say hello. And that person goes, oh my gosh, have you heard what's happening in the news? Have you heard what's happening with the economy? What do you think is going to happen with politics? What do you think is going to happen with our election? How are we going to plan for this? What are we going to do financially? What are we going to do at work? And what are we going to do at home? And imagine they just did this thing where this random stranger just spat all that stuff on you on your front door. Can you imagine? So if a total stranger did that at your front door, how would you react? Would you want to stand there and talk to them for hours? Would you want to take all that on? And if you liken that to our thinking, right? A lot of us will sit on the couch or we'll sit somewhere and we'll just kind of dwell on something. And other people don't know we're doing it, but there's stuff running through our heads, circulating through. And it's kind of similar to someone knocking on your front door and just spitting all that on you and you getting wrapped up in it and then talking to someone about it for hours on end. So when you start to have some of those thoughts that sound like a crazy person in your head, I want you to imagine that it's somebody knocking on your door and they're trying to get your attention so that you can entertain with these thoughts with them and have a conversation with them. But I want you to remember that you have a choice. You have a choice to open the door. You have a choice to have a conversation. You have a choice to stay in the conversation. So if my example was true, if somebody did that, if they knocked on my door, I would open the door and I would answer, and then they would maybe say all that stuff to me and I would maybe talk to them for a bit. But if I could see that it wasn't going anywhere, I would politely say, I'm sorry, I'm tied up. I'm in the middle of something. I can't stay in this conversation, and I would close the door. And so it's the same thing with your thoughts. It's noticing the tone, it's noticing the quality of them, and it's being selective and choosing if you want to follow them and entertain them and have this really long, drawn out conversation with them. And if you're wanting instead to stay grounded and you're wanting to live with less stress, to do that then would be to not engage in this really long conversation with your thinking, to not follow it and stay tied up in it for hours on end. It would be to notice it, kind of like opening the door, noticing it, saying to yourself, I'm not going to go there right now. I'm going to stay in my clarity. I'm going to stay in my grounded space, because that is your natural state. Who you really are is a calm center, is grounded, is clear. Every person has inside of them a calm center. It's always quiet, content, and peaceful. That's your home base. That's your center. That's who you really are. And then we leave that space. We think ourselves away from it. And it's innocent. That's what Sydney Banks, this is based a lot on Sydney Banks. We innocently think ourselves away from that space. So if we have frenetic thinking and we think ourselves away, then we lose our sense of feeling grounded and stable during change and uncertain times. But that means the good news is we can always come back, and we just need to recognize the thinking that's pulling us from that space and then choose to not follow that thinking. And when we do, we come back to our home base, because it's who you really are. And you are grounded and clear and focused and calm. And live in a space of ease. The quieter your mind is, the more you live in a space of ease. So in summary, how to feel more grounded during times of stress and change is to become more aware of your thinking and your habits of thinking. And when your thinking is of a quality that is stressed or frenetic and pulls you from your natural space of clarity, and then choosing to not follow the thinking and to come back. And I want to be clear about something. Choosing to not follow stressful thinking doesn't mean you're being passive. It doesn't mean you're not taking action at all. You still act and live from that space of clarity. You take purposeful action, intentional action, action with clarity. You take decisive action. It's taking action from a space of being grounded and knowing what the right next action step is, versus taking action from spinning out and being stressed and running and racing and rushing through life. So there are two different states to live from then. It's living from our thinking and our habits of thought, or living from our grounded, calm, and clear center. Wonderful. I hope this has been helpful for you. I always love reading your comments, so I would love to hear what you heard today. What did you hear that was new, or what did you hear that was helpful? Drop a note in the comments and let me know. I would love to hear from you. So thanks for watching. I'm Tracey Gazel. And to learn more about me or what I do, you can always visit my website. It's traceygazel.com. And I hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.